This is the AMP'D UP211 Podcast, where we go beyond survival and into reinvention. I'm your host, Rick Bontkowski, and a believer that the most extraordinary transformations begin the moment life says you can't, and you answer, "Watch me." Today's guest redefines what it means to be human and what it means to become art. Viktoria Modesta is the world's first bionic pop artist, a singer, model, and creative visionary who turned the loss of her leg into an ultimate symbol of power and design. Her groundbreaking music video, Prototype, shattered barriers, blended beauty, technology, and defiance into one unforgettable image. A woman standing tall on a gleaming prosthetic spike, declaring herself the model of the future. Stay tuned. This is Viktoria Modesta, and you're listening to the AMP'D UP211 Podcast. Hey everyone, guess what? Viktoria Modesta is here today. Hey Viktoria, what's going on?
Hey, how's it going?
Now, where in the world are you right now?
I'm in California. I'm in Malibu Mountains.
Ooh, so what's the weather like in the Malibu Mountains?
Perfect.
I bet.
Perfect weather. Yep. I'm right above clouds, and it's kind of sunny almost every day here, so it's pretty cool.
I have a few friends that I'm from the Midwest, but they migrated to California, and when I visit them, the thing I'm always struck by is the school buses, because very often they're so old. Because
really?
Yeah, because they never had to be replaced. Whereas,
right. The cars, man, they just we have like an older car, and they just last forever here because the weather is just so mild.
exactly,
Yeah.
they don't age. Because I'd say that looks like a school bus that I was on like 40 something years ago. And they're like, yeah, well, they don't age here. We don't have horrible polar vortexes like you people in Chicago have, And every year I say the same thing. I've lived here all my life, but I still go to that, why do I live here? Why am I still here? Why am I doing this?
Well, it's never too late, right? Like I
Exactly.
moved here quite recently. I was living in West Hollywood before that. I'm very like a city person most of my life, and I was just like, why do I keep looking for a place to go away on the weekend or like a retreat or something? I'm like, why
You're
don't
in
I
the place that you need to be.
yeah, I'm like, why don't I just bring the retreat to me and make that home? So that's what we're doing now.
Good for you. Good for you. I was talking to a friend of mine. We had a few tapings this month, and he was asking me, just out of curiosity, like, oh, who are you interviewing this month? And I'm sort of rolling through it, and then I mentioned you. And he said, I think I've heard of her. And I said, yeah, you probably have. And he said, okay, describe her. And I swear to you, Viktoria, I was like, like I couldn't really assemble an appropriate response to that question, because I thought, well, where the hell do I start? Like, let me break it all down for you. I've got plenty of notes. So, when I was growing up, product of the 70s and also, very much the 80s, there were these like powerful kind of female figures that were sort of in my universe, right? And because I come from music, and I too am a creative, so there's always that creative monster that I'm feeding, which I think you have an enormous creative monster that is ravenously hungry all the time. But I always admired these female figures that would essentially reject the label, but kind of not only define something that was so next level. And you could say, oh, well, who are you talking about? Growing up in the 70s, it was like Cher. She had this ability to just create this identity. And then it became like, oh, Madonna. She sort of pushed back on the labels and said, well, no, I'm me. That's what I am. I'm not that. I'm not that. I'm not that. I'm creating that brand. I'm me. And I always admired that. And of course, I always, as an amputee, followed you, knew who you were. And that's a funny story too. But doing a deeper dive and sort of getting ready to meet you, which is such a pleasure, I thought, yeah, that's Viktoria, man. She's just this force. She's this thing. She's not really a label. Because you could say, okay, yeah, she's a pop star. She's a model. She's an artist. She's this, she's that. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. No, it's this sort of juggernaut of energy. And I really admire it.
With the thing that comes with being more multidisciplinary and multifaceted, the way people come in contact with either my story or my artwork or images, whatever it is so varied. And it goes from like, hey, I just had an accident and I was in a hospital and 10 of my friends sent me a video to I was in a museum and I was doing this, that, or it was like, hey, it was some weird viral Roblox referencing video. And then I was like, who's the person in the video? Oh, it's you. So you never know. So I do want to hear that story of how
Sure.
how I came on your radar. But yeah, no, tell me.
Yeah, I piqued your and I piqued your curiosity somehow. Okay, so many of us in this community come to amputation, limb loss, usually somewhat unexpectedly. You're an interesting case because it was very voluntary and you did not have a quality of life. And for you, being the bold, dare I say, even stubborn person that you are, you're like, no, this is not going to work for me. I want greater things, and this is in the way. So for me, finding out due to a bone disease in my right foot, it was something I knew could possibly be coming, but okay, that day arrives. And my discovery of you really was not an extraordinary set of circumstances. It was simply just me in the dark in my hospital bed, looking at that dimly lit screen and going to search. And I think what I put in was, what does an amputee look like? That was it. And I don't know if it was necessarily about the physical nature of it, more of what does the smile of an amputee look like? What does the pain of an amputee look like? What does the life, the goals, the wins, the losses, trying to find something deeper. And by connecting to simply just images of you, the realization I had in that moment, and sometimes it's hard for me to talk about, but the realization I had in that moment is that anything is possible. Anything. Because how could I not look at this incredibly breathtaking, image of this person who's wearing it, like this armor that no one can touch me. Nobody. Like, this is who I am. And just that alone was enough to say, it's going to be okay.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's going to be okay.
I love that. And, it's funny because I think the only way that sometimes I can tap into that energy back for me is through a conversation like this, through a story like this, right? Because, I think the story behind, making a larger than life image, right? Where all sides of you are intertwined, right? Where you really put yourself out there, where almost like nothing feels private and you're kind of just, putting all of you into this, is that, it gets really complicated. And I too get to a place where I'm like, oh, I need some inspiration today. Right. And which takes us to, like, what is the purpose of some of the artwork that I've created over the years. you know um like, a lot of it, especially, if I'm going through a challenging time, a lot of it feels like, oh, I made that when I had like a whim of energy, when I had like an extra big burst of belief or hope or whatever it was, and I left it all on the dance floor. And it's like breadcrumbs, and I come back to myself. I'm like, whoa. I'm like, remember when you said that, right? Because we forget, like, when things get tough, like, you just forget. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I too forget, like, that I'm a badass motherfucker. You know what I mean? And then I kind of like, and then I just have to go back, and I'm like, right. I'm like, remember when you recorded that song, and you did those lyrics, and then I'll just be like, oh my God, wow. I'm like, imagine that. I'm like, remember that? Like, remember that, what that felt like? Because, like, time passes, and sometimes you just forget. Like, you forget who you were. It's the flip coin of being able to choose a new reality, or a new version of yourself, or a new habit, or a new outlook each day. But you also can completely forget what you have done or who you've been before. And
And
it's
when you
it's a
have
very
those, I think when you have those milestones, those accomplishments, and when I look at your performance at the Paralympics, when I watch, Prototype now, let's say versus, you know, years ago, um, it represents something different now. And for me now, it's an empowerment tool because I feel like I'm part of that club. Like, I'm part of the badass motherfuckers. You know what I mean? Like, that's us. This is the uniform that we wear. And I think that, and I'm not trying to necessarily create a like this toxic positivity kind of atmosphere. This podcast really isn't about that. It's really about understanding on a deeper level what people like yourself go through and what your journey's been like. But I do completely want to echo what you're saying about looking over your shoulder once in a while and saying, I did that. That's pretty cool. And I put a lot into that. And that was a ton of work. And to be able to celebrate that now with the life experience you've had, moving forward from that, and being able to place yourself, in a good lane and say, yeah, that's just part of my journey. It's part of my story. It's that yellow brick road of life. It just sort of winds and, well, we're all trying to get to Oz, right? But
You know what? I was just in Vegas like 3 days ago.
oh,
I
did you
took my
see it at the Sphere?
I did. I saw the Oz at the Sphere.
What'd you think?
Yeah. Oh, I loved it. I mean, it's my favorite. It's one of my favorite movies. Like, people are always like, where, like, tell us about like some of your inspirations, or like, and I'm like, when I met my husband, he was like, I feel like I'm about to swear a lot in this, but
It's okay.
I apologize in advance. But when I met my husband, he took me to a castle on our first date. He flew to London from New York and took me
Wow,
to a
good
castle.
move. You guys
Oh,
listening out there, man? You listening? Good move.
oh yeah, like, don't play it safe, and yeah, like, we met at MIT Media Lab and like kind of hanged out, and then 2 weeks later he was just like, oh, I'm kind of coming to Europe, like, what if I just came to London and took me to a castle? And I was like, why did you take me to a castle? And he was like, because you're Disney as fuck. And I was like, right, right, you know, like I'm like a child, like my childhood was in the 90s. You know what I mean? Like the Little Mermaid, the
Yeah.
whole shebang. Like, I'm really into that. So going to Oz it felt really good actually because everybody's out there just chain smoking from 10 a.m. and gambling, and I was there bringing my mother for her first time ever trip to Vegas to watch Wizard of Oz at this fair. I was like, it feels wholesome, it feels good. But something where you were saying, about the prototype thing is like, one of my favorite things about that whole project is that I really felt like I was going into this like battle, and I was gonna leave everything I have because at that point I just had no idea how I was going to continue existing within like entertainment industry, or even like I was like, I don't want to say that I was like suicidal, but I was in a place where like I just don't get it. I don't get what is my place? Like how do I create space for myself? Because I was sort of I was I had enough looks that people were interested in me as a model. I was a pretty good singer. I was kind of like doing all the stuff, but people were just like, what does it mean you're like this girl with this like leg? What is that? You know what I mean? and
And I
and it
think
was
that's where the labels come from, don't you?
Oh, totally. But, at the time, I mean, it's really difficult to convey that to someone, from a slightly younger generation than me, because, like, there was just nothing. There was just no reference. There was like Amy Mullins, who did a very niche avant garde thing with like Alexander McQueen. There were a couple of athletes,
Yeah.
and it was so isolating and weird. And I was just like, you know what? I was like, I felt like I got given the golden ticket, like a TV station for 1 month acted like a record label, right? They paid for top producers and top directors, and I was able to like pick everything and creative direct. And I was like, oh my God. Um, but it was also, it was a total like marketing experiment, because we use, it's like we turned my entire being into like a product,
Yeah.
right? And to a news story. So there was like a lot of, it's a lot of things to unpack there, but the most important part for me was that the message and the sort of fierce, like kind of desperation, but also like conviction that I will set this right. The fact that that came through and touched so many people, right? Like still believe that, yes, there were radical design decisions and everything else, but I do think that there was a kind of an authenticity where I wasn't playing. I
No.
wasn't like, hey, let's put on an outfit and
Mm-mm.
entertain people. I was just like, oh my God, you know what I mean?
Well, I always
Like,
refer it to like your fuck you moment, like, fuck you, this is me. And
yeah,
no one is going to stop me. And
yeah.
that's the feeling that I get from it. Because when you do start to try to peel back some of the layers and you say, okay, well, what is this an exercise in? And I agree
Mhm.
with you that there's an element, okay, it's sort of a marketing experiment. But, I see so much more in that particular piece of, music video, short film. There's empowerment, there's disability, there's sexuality, There is, I mean, the list is just, it's hard to assemble it all. So if someone said, you know, what did the storyboard look like for that, right? Like who drew this out? You know, who created the minutes for this? And then we're going to go to this, you know, this very military kind of, you know, section. And then there's going to be this, you know, almost spider-like, you know, sort of movement, and the spike comes down. And I mean, talk about imagination. The one thing I wanted to ask you real quick, what are your dreams like?
Oh, my dreams. I have to say, like, my subconscious is like pretty tensely wired overall. Like, and you know, and it really reflects in the fact that, you know, like I'm living in the most serene place you can possibly imagine, because, you know, um the emotions that I'm still processing to this day, you know, while dealing with, you know, all of my physical stuff and like all of my like, you know, beginning of life kind of like journey, you know, it's a lot. It's a lot. And, you know, and I'm really grateful to the fact that, you know, that I have the outlet with my creative work, because I can, you know, people sometimes are like, you know, well, your stuff is like kind of dark, you know, but it's also like, you know, it has an element, it's intense. Like I see it as like it's intense and it has a lot of power, but it's always very positive. It's always very, it's you know, it's like aggressively positive, which is actually something that I believe like the world just needs, right?
Yeah,
Because like hate and negativity is such a strong force. And yet, as if you think of like anything positive, like love and empathy or belief, right? It's always like, oh, we expect it to just be like, shh. And it's like, no, like make that like a freaking dagger, right?
absolutely. Absolutely. No, and I draw a lot of that from your work and the images as well. And I think that very often in art, it can be widely misunderstood. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes when people don't get it, okay, you weren't supposed to get it.
Yeah, it's almost like you know, our understanding is like a mirror to what is going on the inside world. And you know, I think a lot about that with music specifically, like either sad music or aggressive music, for example, you know. Um and it is like, you know, I know that there's some of my most heartfelt times with music have been where, you know, you might feel so much frustration about something or so much sadness that like nothing makes you feel understood until you hear that really, really, really hard song.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, and all of a sudden, like you feel okay. Like when I was a little younger, like I used to get like really agitated when I heard like very, very overly happy music, because I'm like, it's not that I don't like it, it's that it makes me see insight even more. It makes me see that, you know, I'm going through something right now and I just can't relate to that. So I think it's that like relational thing that, you know, oh my God, the lady who did the spider sculpture actually, I, I forget her first name, something Bourgeois, maybe Marie Bourgeois, maybe you can maybe look it up. But you know, the one that did the famous metal spider, you know, she talked about something like, you know, artist's job is to do and express things that, ordinary people don't have the courage to or don't want to, right? And it is that, and I think that, but I do think that there is a very big difference um, between intensity and negativity, and intensity for the purpose of like cathartic, like expression. You know what I mean? Um, and in this specific category of things, when you're a person who has dealt with a lot of physical pain, or just this general like mountain of different stuff that you have to think about extra, that
Yeah.
like it does things to you. It shapes you differently, it wires your brain differently, and you do become more resilient, and but it is one of my really big passions, more like recently, like in the last 5 years, have been the balance of like, working towards a lighter, more positive, more accepting, more forgiving way of being, a more empathetic, right? Or even self loving way, while having enough room for all of the stuff that actually happens, right, when you're dealing with with a health challenge. Like it's a big deal, and I feel like people like myself and yourself, we're in a really good position to like make that experiment like really worthwhile.
No, I think you're right. And I want to echo a couple things that you said, because we're in some ways, and I would think for you, this very much applies. I would think that you experience some pressure in terms of the what's next pressure. And I always compare it to my professional life, not so much in the podcast space, because to be quite honest, I set my standards very low. I don't put a lot on myself. I'm like, I don't come from broadcasting. Yeah, we got this cool little following now. And I don't know, it's like, what the hell? Like, I'm not an expert, and all the DMs come flooding in. And I'm like, I don't know. But there's that pressure. And when you reach a point, because I think about your performance at the Paralympic Games, and that being such a turning point, such an explosive moment, because up until that point, I believe like Paralympians, able amputees, high functioning amputees, was just starting to percolate. It was like, oh, these people are not cripples. Oh,
Oh yeah, like you mean you can string a sentence and that you like
they're not
you
dumb.
can walk fast, like
they're
it was it was
they're
very
not
like Nate vibe.
yeah, they're not ugly. They're not this, they're not that. All these things that I guess were an equation, a calculus for your life is over. It was starting to shift just a little bit. And then that happened. And it was like, oh, wait a minute. Hold, stop the clock. Something really big is happening right now. These people are superstars. They're not just your everyday people. They're doing amazing things. They're climbing mountains, not only physically, but culturally. They're literally climbing mountains. They're making these amazing things happen, and the perceptions are going into overdrive. They're they're
Yeah.
they're fast forwarding now. Whereas when you think about, let's say, post World War II,
Hmm.
amputees were just that was like end of life kind of stories. Like you're done.
Yeah.
Here's your wooden leg. Good luck.
Oh, yeah, you're right. You're really right. And I think also like coming from sorry, I'm just here. So coming from like Eastern Europe,
Mm,
like it's really tricky to like really explain to anyone like what the full weight of like eugenics was like. But like I was born and they like messed up my leg and they did a whole bunch of stuff that like you should go to prison for. And then they were like, well, we're just going to put her into an orphanage.
Yeah.
Like, she ain't
And
right.
and your mom fought for you, didn't she?
Yeah, totally. My mom fought for me, and you know, it's really hard to explain, but it's like, I think that when we look at like the course of history of how this is all, we're in the tiniest little sliver of where literally like folk tale ruled this whole situation previously, because like, I remember even like my grandma and stuff, she like grew up in a village. She'd be like, you see somebody with a burn, or you see somebody with a funny eye, or like, or a limp, and you're like, you would literally be like, not look at them because you feel like you might catch a curse from them, right? Like,
Yeah.
this is like, you
I
have
think
to
I think I've
remember.
actually used that joke. Like, don't worry, it's not contagious.
Oh, no, but it's true. It's very true that it comes from curse and disease, and it comes from this feeling of like, you know, um, mystery forces, and then it's like, well, anything that is different is unknown and we don't understand it, and like, so even though it doesn't feel like that's part of the current sort of like outlook DNA, but like it really is, and and then there's like another little cultural cliche moment where, you know I've heard people talk about this thing of like going from, hero to zero, right? And it's like um, you're either sort of this fantastical superhero character, or you kind of like barely,
Yeah.
you're like very crippled, right? And I think that, we're in a very exciting time where I think that, a more deeper, colorful, diverse understanding is starting to emerge of the fact that you just you can't you can't put millions of people in a basket of disabled and have the same kind of language, because the level of function, the level of how deeply they are associating that with their identity, like, I mean, you just can't, like, it's, so I'm kind of like, I'm very excited to just, yeah, I'm always really excited about the future, because I'm like, okay, I'm like, let's just keep pushing it into this direction where it's just like, like, it's very individual.
Hmm.
And um
I was just
like,
talking to someone the other day about the exact same thing that you're referring to, and I said, "Isn't it exciting that we get to be a little part of that movement, a little part of that momentum, even in our own little way, whether we're destigmatizing something or we're letting others know that there's more good days than bad days, whatever that is, our little grain of sand, wherever we place it, it's so exciting to say, okay, 100, 200 years from now, I mean, who knows when they're literally, growing your limb in a lab and then attaching it. And, you know, I hear all the really cool theories, but I think it's really, really neat to be part of that process, that journey that's occurring. And when I look at what you've done, just in your own very, very unique, singular way, it's not even so much about disability or being an amputee as it is you've challenged what it is when you start to think about, well, what is the human form? And to me, that is something that is fascinating, because I am a creative person and I really enjoy when people are different and they have different ideas and they go outside of the norms and say, hey, did you ever think about this? hey, look over here. I know you're so focused on that thing that everyone's thinking about, but check this out over here. And I actually showed a prototype to my girlfriend, Sarah. And she was just like, I mean, I literally had to like pick her mouth up off the floor. She was just like, that's one of the most incredible things I've ever seen, heard. It conjures up so much thought. So to say it's thought provoking would be a massive understatement, because it represents so many different things. And to be able to put yourself into that project, that space, it takes a lot of courage. And I'm not just trying to blow smoke. I mean, it takes, for lack of a better phrase, it takes balls, man, to do that. It takes a lot to just make that happen and to put yourself out there. And I think it's something to be very, very proud of. And yes, I'm glad when you say, yeah, I heard someone's losing a limb and I sent them your video. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Very, very, very important piece of, let's call it the, limb loss history books that needs to be, in that reel, so to speak. When you enter this particular club, this is standardized viewing right here. It's part of the curriculum, okay?
Just to kind of like, no, it's really, truly one of my favorite things. But a few things that you were saying, that I just want to touch upon, like, so, you know, one thing that I am literally the biggest advocate for is the fact that, like, post disability futurism, like, this is the time. Like, if we absolutely have to guide those topics together, because what I've learned from seeing all of the amazing kind of world of innovation and tech and science and stuff is, like, you have you know there's a massive opportunity to really deeply understand how to develop and make things better once you're actually facing a challenge. Like, it's okay to be like, oh, what would it be like if, like, we could just make music sound better or whatever, like do different headphones or design some, like, thing. But, like, a very magical thing happens when someone is designing um, for the benefit of someone's health, well-being, or function. And and that is, like, one of my most favorite things. So I really desperately believe that, like, when people think about amputees, disability, mobility devices, that there is a level of um, demedicalization that is slowly happening, where we need to be thinking about those bodies as bodies of the future. And I do think that that is where it's going. I don't think it's really going to matter eventually what you're using your device for. We're just going to be humans that are kind of, we're assisted by technology in different ways. And I don't think it will matter. I don't think it will matter,
And I think a
really.
lot of what you're describing will be perceived as upgrades. Would you like an upgrade?
For sure.
Would you like to be able to see like 2 miles clearly? Oh yeah, absolutely. Let's do that.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah,
want
for
do,
sure.
do
I
you want
mean,
to run 4 times faster? We can make that happen for you. you know?
yeah, yeah. It's that there's a lot of opportunities, and there's also different levels of, like, I won't get into it, but um, there is a lot of things that are being made that are that have a little bit of an obsession about, like, you know transcending, like, the body and becoming something other or else. But there is also a huge amount of stuff that simply allows you to live and unfold all the different parts of, being human in a more kind of advanced kind of way. And that's really sort of my lane, is like less Terminator and less Neuralink, putting into your brain into the computer, and more like, hey, how can I make this human experience better? How can I communicate better, express myself better, easier, more creatively? One other thing that came up to me was when you were talking about the prototype video was, that is a really, sometimes people wonder, like, what are some good use cases of this like punk energy?
Yeah.
And I would say, like, that is it. The prototype video for me was just like, I will give you the level of sophisticated anarchy that you are like not ready for. Like, take it, and and that is, I do think that, that kind of punk energy is really important, and sometimes it gets misrepresented and used for bad reasons, but in small doses, in the correct environment, it's what we need to like propel things.
Do you feel like
Right.
being living in the UK when you were sort of in that, teenage sort of space was a lot of that scene, a lot of that culture? What kind of impression did it have on you in terms of societal norms and what you saw as important, and eventually what seems to me like a very deliberate sort of pushback?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had, like, it didn't feel like luck at the time, but now looking back on it, I'm like, it was a silver lining. Went from very, very, repressed kind of backwards culture of post-Soviet Latvia, and I ended up like, in the subculture of London. And a lot of the energy and the sort of, if you want to call it braveness, right, but more like I felt like my early teenage experiences being kind of in UK dance culture and like extreme fashion and, all the body modifications, all the amazing, wonderful things that I saw, it kind of armed me with like, right, I'm like, this is how you come and you just claim who you are. Like, this is how this is what it looks like if you decide to have an alternative life, an alternative persona, an alternative way of being, and I used to say this about like early sort of impressions of disability kind of like stuff, or like my leg, just the fact that I was wearing a prosthetic, I would very frequently just go into a space and it's like, I will not give you a moment to reach into your like uneducated archival sort of thing of like what you're about to, I'm just going to tell you exactly how you should feel about me and what this means in this specific meeting.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
I do.
And I think that, that like we don't people don't always realize how much personal power you really have,
Gosh,
right?
to me, that if there's a takeaway from this interview, boom, that is so important to me. And I say that all the time. You don't realize how much power you actually have until you
Yeah.
finally tap into it. And don't hesitate. Just throw that damn flag in the sand and say, this is who I am, period. And I love the way you framed it. Like, I'm not going to let you tell me, label me, or, categorize me in, whatever way. And I can only imagine at 15 making the decision that you did, knowing, or maybe there being many unknowns, okay, this part of me is going away, and what was the seed that was planted as a kid growing up, with a disability, struggling after, these botched, medical procedures, and being in a place that couldn't serve you well and would just essentially just dump you in an orphanage at that young age. Where did you arrive at that decision? Because I would assume that word, for a lot of people, that word amputation is like such a bad word. Like, don't say that. At what point in your mind, this young person saying, I think that's a possibility. I need to start processing that. How old were you, and where did it come from?
Well, this is definitely back to like the whole kind of Disney narrative, right? And so like, when I was a kid, I just I really identified with this idea, okay, things are so grim. The adults seem to be really opinionated and strong-minded, but don't actually seem to be particularly like successful at anything for me to like feel like I should be treating them with authority. Like that was just like I was a little smartass, and I was just like, you
I
know,
can't imagine that.
right? Like I just have some like lady just going, "Oh, like what are you gonna do when how are you
Poor
gonna?" And
thing.
and I'd just be like, well, like I don't know. Like I mean, I used to just drive my grandma crazy. I would just be like, well, I used to tell her when I was about 7 that I was just gonna like move to Hollywood, and that like and I just like and as bananas as it was, like, and for her who like survived the world war and
Yeah.
like ran across borders and like like she was
Fighting for
just
her
like
life every day.
oh my god, like this girl is just like
She's in
off.
fantasy land.
She's in fantasy land, and but I think that the grimness really exercises your imagination, right? I think it's a very common thing for people to have like an escape reality in their mind, and for me, like really work to treat, because I would just see and I'd just be like, okay, I'm like, so this is my Cinderella moment. Like I'm still in this reality. Like I need to find a moment of transformation. So when I did come to London and I started, being part of like music, fashion scene and everything, I'm like, oh, I'm like adult version of Disney. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
The way you overcome that is you transform with your own powers. You transform your image or your life, your lifestyle, and in turn like transform the whole little kind of destiny situation.
Well, you mentioned Cinderella moment. I mean, I look at that moment at the Paralympics and I'm like, that's a Cinderella moment right there.
Totally. That
That
was me coming out in the ball.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like, wow. Look at that. That's
Yeah.
magic. That's that
Magic.
stardust, that Disney
Yeah.
stardust that happens. Like there it
Yeah,
is
totally.
right there.
Yeah, it was 100% that. It was transforming like uh, you know, and I will tell you that I am currently going through a whole new transformation. So I like recently over a year ago, I ended up having osseointegration,
Oh, you did.
which I did.
That's
So
are you mentioning that on socials?
I am. I am. It's still so
I'm like, I think I have an exclusive right here.
I haven't really discussed it. I haven't really discussed it. I just, I did a couple of posts and things, but
That's a huge
um
step.
it's a huge step. So like, I mean, I've had such a successful, amazing time, like having a wardrobe of every kind of prosthetic and, performing in so many amazing places. And my life kind of got to a duality where I was like, I would go on stage and do these amazing things, but then my daily life would start declining more and more and more. Cause, I had the amputation and it seemed like it was the final journey. And, I just started having all the typical things, the like muscle atrophy and skin issues and all of that kind of, no amount of good doctors were really going to prevent that.
And let's just
Um,
stop for a moment, because I really want to get the big highlighter out and go over what you just said. Everyone that's listening, when you see those images, when you see, this incredibly beautiful model, statuesque, person, she's human. She has the same issues that you're having. She has skin breakdown. She has atrophy. She has these things too. And so
it's like
often,
ballerina feet, if you ever seen like
of
ballerina,
course, absolutely,
right?
it's terrifying. It's
It's
terrifying.
terrifying. It
It's
was
what you
like,
sacrifice for your art. It
it
really
is.
is.
Yes,
And
it
I
is.
remember talking to my prosthetist and I said, how are these people running full speed? How? Explain it to me. I don't get it. Because I'm in this thing and I'm like, run? How am I going to run? And he says, what you're not realizing, you have any idea how much pain they're in the next day?
Yes.
Do you have any idea how much swelling they have for the next 2 days?
Yes.
And then it takes them a week just to be able to train again? Like,
Yep.
you're not getting it. You're just seeing that little thing, which, don't get me wrong, is a massive achievement, physical achievement. But I just want to highlight that only because so often I see this this strange form of like jealousy that happens. Like, oh, well, she must have the best prosthetists, and she probably has someone taking care of every single detail of this and that and gets all the just. I'm like, you don't get it, man. We all struggle. There is a struggle. And when someone is doing performance art, this is not easy. This is high level activity. It's going to test you, and all eyes are on you, right? So what other choice do you have? You have to somehow make it happen, just like any other performer, But sorry to break your momentum. It's
No,
just
no,
so
you're
important.
it is very, very important, and I think what's even more important to highlight is that, that sustained me for a really long time. I believe that if I didn't have that career where I was able to feel like on top of the world for those like 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, for the performances and the rehearsals and stuff, like I would have probably had to intervene medically like way earlier. But the adrenaline of being able to do these amazing things that like defy gravity and stuff, like wearing the spike,
Yeah.
it really fueled me, or even just having, my chrome day-to-day prosthetic. Like I would go and do an errand for 20 minutes. I would feel like $1,000,000 for those 20 minutes. And people would be like, oh my God, I can't believe this is possible, And then I would go home and I couldn't do anything for the rest of the day. Like that's how bad it got. And but it really fueled me. It really fueled me. It felt like I was, so it was pretty hard decision for me to make. And I actually didn't even know that there was any procedures for me to go further, right? Because you got to remember I had a voluntary interpretation and I was like, all right, this is my stop where I get off. So when I went to get some consultations and they were like, well, have you considered doing an amputation revision? realignment, thigh lengthening, and osseointegration. And I was like, what? Like, excuse me? Um, and it took like no time at all for me to just be like, oh my God, like, okay, So, I did the full lot. I did all the things. I
Yeah.
had like 6 procedures on the list. And, it's been such a wild experience for me because you know in many ways, like I was shooting this project for Elf Cosmetics like right before my surgery, where
Yeah.
they did like a little documentary.
I've seen
And it
it.
was like, and it's like, when you have like a protagonist in a story, right? You have this, like, they go through a struggle, then they have the journey, and then they like rise somewhere. Like, and I was like, oh my God, it's like I had that whole story play out, and I'm back at the beginning again. Like, I'm at the beginning of the thing where I'm doing the hard thing again, and I don't really know like what's next. And my osseointegration went like so successful. Like,
That's great.
it's if you're an amputee and you have heard about it, or if you want to look it up, like, I literally wholeheartedly encourage you to go and look at it, because my level of discomfort from wearing the socket to no socket is uncomparable. It's uncomparable. Um, my hiccup has been is that we lengthened my thigh by 2 inches, and I just forgot that somewhere in my DNA, my bones in my left leg, they just don't want to grow as fast as the other
Mm.
bones. So it's just decided to just not grow. So we did all that distraction, and then it just. So I had to go back in March, and I had to have a titanium rod put into my thigh to like just seal the deal. Um, so unexpected things
Oh,
happened.
sure.
Like, I have had to take a way, way longer pause from my usual career and lifestyle. Um, and I also, everything got put to the test. All my wellness practices, all my meditations, all my, therapy, like everything, because, going through this level of surgeries is no joke.
No.
No joke, you know?
And right now, in terms of that osseointegration, that particular process,
Mhm.
where are you at today? Like, what is your level of function in terms of mobility, and how are you feeling?
Um, I mean, it's unrecognizable. And what I mean by that is that prior to surgery, I was maybe doing 2,500 steps a day. Towards the end, things got pretty bad. And my walk is not perfect yet right now, because I'm still recovering from like surgical pain in like my thigh and my hip and stuff. But I can do up to 13,000 steps
Oh
a
my
day.
gosh. Wow.
And I'm never like, oh my God, at the end of the day, like, doesn't exist.
Yeah, get
So
me out of this bear trap. I can't take it anymore.
honestly, like, and I say this wholeheartedly, like, if anybody ever wants to like reach out to me, like message me on Instagram or whatever, like, I'm happy to, give any information. But I do think that, like, an integrated prosthetic is really the future. Like, our bodies are not created to be able to take all that force. Um, and I've heard of people not going for osseointegration because they want to play extreme sports, right? There's some danger with that. But I'm like, dude, I'm like, I'm as somebody who sacrificed a lot for being able to have the Cinderella moment,
Yeah.
it's like getting your regular quality of life does not compare. It's like it's really, and I'm still like, I want to say that I'm like probably a couple of months away from like being sort of pain free.
Yeah.
Um, and uh but also it's a new chapter, right? It's like I have been somebody that's been defined by the object that I wear, right? Very Cinderella vibe here, like my glass slipper. It was like, oh, it's like I put it on and I magical powers appear and all this kind of different stuff. And now it's just like part of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
It's so different. So,
Seems
you
like the
know,
next step to me. Like
yeah,
this was just, you know, if and when you have a chance to look back, let's say, a few years from now, and you'll say, well, yeah, that was the next step. That was the next part of that evolution of me. And all of these sort of, apparatus, all these devices that I was wearing have now morphed into, well, now it's a part of me,
yeah.
right? It's that blend of, man and machine. It's that fusion that has now occurred. And I think it's really exciting to think about in terms of how will that affect your creativity? How will that affect your outlook and what your pursuits are, moving forward? Because some of the things that you've done, I mean, when I look at like the Rolls-Royce campaign, I'm blown away by it. Like this is just incredible. And I'm a marketing guy, in business. So I see those things as just visionary pieces of marketing, just groundbreaking, trailblazing type of stuff. And I mean, I am very excited to see what's next for you and where this takes you into, whatever you decide to do. And I do appreciate you saying, yeah, if you want to know more, don't be afraid to reach out. That you're not untouchable.
Oh, no, for sure. For sure. I think it's I like what one thing I will say, is that over the years it's like I'm quite picky in terms of like how I um contribute to like the activist kind of like part. And I tend to be the person like I don't want to get in the room and like argue a point, but I will show you how to do it. Like
Yeah.
this is how it's done. That thing that you were like, it's like, this is how you do it. This is what I meant. You know what I mean? Like, just put it in practice.
Yep.
Like, no, 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 like trying to like, like convince someone something. Um, but I do like, I really don't take for granted, all the people who have, who have felt any help or relief or guidance or anything from the things that I've done, because it's really special. And the future stuff and the current stuff of like how it's impacted my practice. I mean, it's already been pretty mind blowing, to be honest, because like in the more like recent years, like I started expanding my creative practice. I started working with like the virtual identity of like, what does a virtual Victoria do in the world? What are her special powers? And then, I've done some zero gravity flights and
Yeah.
thinking about like disability and space travel and like what is our contribution there. And like, so it's pretty cool. Like
I'd say it's
things
beyond
are
pretty cool, but it's just me.
things are very like I've coined this framework recently, which it's like my experiments are in Earth, space, and the metaverse. Like that's where we're at right now, and it's exciting. It's that thing that you said where it's just like anything is possible. That's
Yeah.
where I'm at right
And
now.
I
Anything is possible.
completely appreciate your ability to take those mediums and see them, as like, the colors in which you paint with, and
Yes.
to be able to draw from that and combine it and test it and push the limits of it to say, again, anything is possible. And I so appreciate just how human you are and how practical you are. And it's been just an amazing hour. I have a million other questions, but you know how it goes in the old podcast world. There's only so much that we can get on tape.
Gotta leave something for another time.
Yeah, I think so. I feel that way because I'm a musician, and they always say that, like, yeah, you got to leave them wanting another encore. Sometimes you just got to pull away and say thank you and good night.
For sure.
Viktoria Modesta, thank you so much for being here, being part of the AMP'D UP211 podcast. I know the very few people that I let it sneak out that you were coming on the show were just like jumping up and down, like, are you serious? Are you serious? I'm like, yeah. We're going to make it happen. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. And if you want to check out Viktoria, she's not hard to find online. Her channels on YouTube and her Instagram and everything else is out there. If you search for her, you will find an abundance of information, inspiring and otherwise. So again, Viktoria, thank you. My name is Rick Bontkowski. This is the AMP'D UP211 podcast, and I want to wish everyone health and happiness.